Back in February, I spent 4 days completely alone in a house that wasn't even finished being torn apart, and I haven't slept with the lights off since. My husband Tyler and I bought our first house last fall. It was a fixer-upper, the kind of place real estate listings call full of potential, which really just means cheap because something is wrong with it. In our case, the something was the plumbing. The pipes under the kitchen were original to the house, which was built in the 60s, and they needed to be completely replaced before we flooded our own basement. To get to the pipes, the contractor had to cut an access panel into the wall under our staircase. It led into a crawl space that ran the length of the house, low and narrow, the kind of space you forget exists until someone cuts a hole into it. The contractor told us it would take about a week. He propped a sheet of plywood over the opening when his crew left each day, since we didn't have a real door for it yet. Tyler got called away for work the second week of the renovation, a site inspection 2 states over. Gone Thursday morning, back Sunday night. I wasn't thrilled about being alone in a house with a hole cut into the wall, but I had Diesel, our German Shepherd mix, and I told myself 4 days would go by fast. The morning Tyler left, the contractor mentioned something offhand while he was loading his truck. He said his guy had gone further down the crawl space than planned the day before, chasing a bad section of pipe, and had come back out saying it smelled different toward the far end, past where the original blueprints showed the space ending. He laughed it off as old houses having old smells. I didn't think about it again until much later. Thursday was normal, or normal enough. The crew worked until 5, packed up, and I ordered takeout and watched television until I fell asleep on the couch. Around 9 that first night alone, Diesel got up from his spot by my feet and trotted over to the staircase wall, sniffed along the bottom edge of the plywood panel, and then walked away like nothing had happened. I barely registered it at the time. Friday was when things started for real.
I was in bed around 11 when Diesel,
Hey there.
who sleeps at the foot of our
Subscribe
bed
to my
every single
channel.
night without fail,
And also press this bell
got up
icon.
and walked to the bedroom door. He stood there, not barking, not whining, just standing, perfectly still with his ears forward, staring at the hallway. I called him back to bed. He didn't move. I had to physically get up and walk him back, and even then he wouldn't lie down. He just sat at the edge of the bed facing the door for almost 20 minutes before he finally settled. I told myself it was probably a possum in the yard. We'd had them before. I went back to sleep. Saturday morning, I went down to make coffee and noticed the plywood over the crawl space access wasn't sitting the way the contractor had left it. He always leaned it flat against the opening. This time it was angled, like it had been pushed from the inside and not quite put back. I figured one of the workers must have gone back in for something Friday afternoon and not lined it up right. I didn't think much of it. I had errands to run, so I left for most of the day. When I pulled into the driveway that evening, I sat in the car for a second before going in, which wasn't like me. The porch light was on a timer and should have already switched on, but the front of the house was dark. I told myself the bulb had probably just burned out. Inside, Diesel didn't greet me at the door the way he normally does. He was already standing by the staircase wall when I walked in, the one with the access panel, just staring at it. And he didn't move from that spot for almost 2. I checked the rest of the kitchen. Nothing else seemed touched. I told myself I must have forgotten to clip it, even though I knew I hadn't. While I was standing there, I noticed the back door, the one that led from the kitchen to the side yard, wasn't sitting flush in its frame the way it usually did. The deadbolt was still thrown, but the door itself looked like it had been pulled shut in a hurry, rather than closed all the way and checked. By that point, Diesel had stopped eating his own food. He just paced between the living room and the staircase wall, back and forth all afternoon. I tried locking him in the bedroom with me so I could relax, but he scratched at the door so hard I let him out before he hurt himself. I called my friend Olivia around 7 that night, just to have someone to talk to while I waited out the last few hours before Tyler got home. I told her everything. The scraping, the dog, the pretzel bag, all of it. She listened, but I could tell from the pauses that she thought I was working myself up over nothing. The way you do when you're alone in a house for too many days in a row. She told me to put on a movie and try to distract myself. And for a while, that's exactly what I did. Sitting on the couch with Diesel pressed against my side instead of at the foot of the bed where he usually stayed. Around 9 that night, with Tyler due home in a few hours, I heard the scraping again. Except this time it didn't stop after a minute. It kept going slow and steady. And underneath it, I could hear something that sounded almost like breathing through the wall. I stood frozen in the kitchen with my phone in my hand for what felt like 10 minutes before I worked up the nerve to call the police instead of just sitting there. The 2 officers who showed up were polite but clearly skeptical. They walked the perimeter of the house, checked the crawl space access from outside through the foundation vent, and told me they didn't see any sign of entry.
I used to live 2 units down from the building's shared laundry room, and for almost a year, that felt like the most convenient thing about my apartment. After last spring, it's the thing that still makes my stomach drop every time I pass it. My building only had 12 units, all on one floor, which made it feel more like a small community than a typical apartment complex. The hallway carpet was that thin, industrial kind that showed every footprint after it rained, and the building manager never seemed to fix the flickering light fixture at the far end, no matter how many times tenants complained about it. I knew most of my neighbors by name. One of them was a guy named Marcus, who lived directly across the hall. We weren't close, but we were friendly in the way you are with someone you see in the hallway every other day. He'd hold the door for me, ask about my day, that kind of thing. Nothing that ever felt off, at least not at first. It started small. I'd come home from my shift at the hospital, usually around 11 at night, and Marcus would somehow already be in the hallway, like he'd been waiting. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. After the 3rd or 4th time, I started timing my arrival differently, just to test it, leaving earlier or later than usual. He was still there. Then he started commenting on things he shouldn't have known. He mentioned once that I must have had a long day because I'd left for work an hour late that morning. I never told him my schedule. I started locking my door even when I was just stepping out to grab my mail, which I had never bothered doing before. I mentioned the hallway thing to another neighbor, an older woman named Carol who lived at the end of the floor and had been in the building longer than anyone. She got quiet for a second and told me Marcus had done something similar to a tenant who lived in my unit before me, a woman who moved out abruptly without... After that, small things kept happening. I'd come home to find my doormat moved again, or a single light on inside my apartment that I was certain I'd turned off. One night I came home to find my apartment smelling faintly like cologne, the same cologne Marcus wore. I stood in my doorway for almost a full minute before I made myself walk inside and check every room. A few nights after that, I noticed one of the throw pillows on my couch had been moved from the left side to the right, and a paperback I'd left face down on the arm of the couch was now sitting closed on the coffee table with the bookmark gone entirely. I searched for that bookmark for 20 minutes before giving up. Bree said I was being paranoid about pillow placement, which, looking back, is a strange thing to need convincing about. Bree finally believed me the day she got home before I did and found our front door unlocked, even though we both swore we'd locked it that morning. Nothing was missing, nothing was disturbed. The door was just unlocked, like someone had opened it and walked back out. We started leaving notes for each other confirming when we locked up, just so we'd have something to compare. For 2 weeks, everything checked out. The door was locked every single time one of us left, and locked every single time we got home. I started to think maybe I really had been imagining things. I stood in the hallway staring at it through the gap in the door for a long time before I understood what that actually meant. Someone had to have been inside the apartment to hook that chain from the inside. And if the chain was hooked, that meant whoever did it hadn't left yet. My hands were shaking too badly to even try my key in the deadbolt again.
I backed away from the door entirely and went down to the end of the hallway as far from our apartment as I could get while still staying on the floor. I didn't go in. I called the police from the hallway and waited by the stairwell until they arrived, jumping at every sound the building made, certain each one was the chain rattling loose or a door opening somewhere behind me. When they got there, they found the chain exactly as I described it. They had to force the door because the chain held from the inside. Once they got in, they did a full sweep of the apartment, checking every closet and behind the shower curtain while I stood frozen in the doorway. Nobody was there. The fire escape window in our bedroom, the one that had been painted shut since before we moved in, had been forced open from the outside, paint chips scattered across the windowsill and onto the carpet beneath it. The officers said whoever it was had likely heard me coming up the stairs and gone out the window rather than risk being caught at the door. They couldn't say for certain it was Marcus. There was no proof, no fingerprints they could pull that meant anything. Nothing concrete enough to make an arrest. They did note that the chain had clearly been installed and used by someone who knew exactly how it worked.
I matched with a guy named Connor on a dating app back in the fall, and for the first couple of weeks, it honestly felt like a good match. We talked about hiking, he sent good morning texts that weren't overbearing, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, rather than just rushing toward anything physical. We met up twice for coffee, before things started feeling different. After our second date, he asked if he could walk me to my car, which felt normal enough at the time. A few days later, I noticed he'd liked photos on my Instagram going back almost 2 years, posts from long before we'd ever matched. I mentioned it to my sister, half joking, and she said some people just go down a rabbit hole when they're interested in someone. I wanted to agree with her. About a week after that, I was leaving the gym I go to on weeknights and noticed Connor standing near the entrance, scrolling on his phone like he was waiting for someone. I'd never mentioned the name of my gym to him, not once, not even in passing. He acted surprised to see me, said it was a small world, and asked if I wanted to grab dinner since I was already out. I made up an excuse about having plans and left as quickly as I could without seeming rude. I told myself it really could have been a coincidence, since it wasn't an unusual gym in a town with limited options. The texts got more frequent after that. He'd ask what I was doing in a way that started to feel less like curiosity and more like he expected an account of my entire day. One night, he sent a message saying he'd driven past my apartment on his way home from work and seen my bedroom light on, which he found comforting because it meant I was safe. I never told him which window was my bedroom. When I took longer than usual to respond, he'd send a follow-up.
I told him I needed some space after about 3 weeks of this, and that's when things shifted entirely. He didn't get angry, at least not at first. He just kept texting, long messages explaining how much our connection meant to him and how he didn't understand why I'd want to slow things down when we had something so rare. I stopped responding completely after that, hoping it would fade out on its own the way most things like that eventually do. It didn't fade. About 4 days after I stopped responding, I came home from work to find a coffee cup sitting on the hood of my car in the parking lot of my apartment complex from the same coffee shop where we'd had our second date. There was no note, nothing written on it, just the cup sitting there like it had been placed deliberately. I told myself it could have been left by anyone, even though some part of me already knew better. I blocked him on every platform I could think of that same night. For about a week, things were quiet, and I genuinely believed it was over. I told my sister about the coffee cup, and for the first time since I'd started mentioning Connor's behavior, she stopped treating it like something to laugh off. She asked if I wanted her to come stay with me for a few nights, but I told her I was probably fine, mostly because I didn't want to admit how unsettled I actually was. Then I started noticing a car. a dark gray sedan that I didn't recognize, parked across the street from my apartment building on 3 separate evenings within the same week. I couldn't see the driver clearly from my window, and I told myself plenty of people parked on that street.
The same gray sedan showed up in the parking lot of the restaurant where I worked twice that same week, parked at the far edge near the employee entrance, rather than anywhere a customer would normally leave their car. I asked one of my coworkers to walk out with me to my car both nights, just in case, and both times, the sedan was gone by the time we got outside. The night everything changed, I'd worked a closing shift and gotten home a little after 11. As I was walking up to my building, I noticed the gray sedan parked in its usual spot, except this time I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat, completely still, not on their phone, not doing anything, except watching the entrance to my building. I didn't look directly at it. I kept walking, got inside, and went straight up to my apartment. I locked the door, checked the deadbolt twice, and texted Priya, who was out for the night, to let her know what I'd seen. She told me to call the non-emergency police line, just to have it on record, which I did. They said they'd send a car by when they could, but it wasn't an emergency situation, since nothing illegal had technically happened. About 20 minutes later, I heard a knock on my door. Not aggressive, just a normal knock, the kind you'd use if you were dropping off a package. I looked through the peephole and couldn't see anyone, which made my stomach drop more than if I had seen someone standing there. I stayed completely silent and didn't move toward the door. I muted my phone so it wouldn't light up or make a sound if... The police arrived about 15 minutes after he left. They checked the parking lot and found the gray sedan still parked across the street, but Connor was gone. They ran the plates and confirmed it was registered to him, which at least gave me something concrete to file a report with. One of the officers walked the floor with me and noted the scuff marks near my doorframe, low to the ground, consistent with someone crouching there for a while. I filed for a restraining order the following week, and the hearing was scheduled for about a month out, which meant a month of checking my window every time I heard a car door outside. The order was granted, and the judge included the restaurant and my apartment complex by name after I explained the sedan sightings at both locations. Connor didn't show up to contest it, which my lawyer said was actually common in these situations, since showing up would mean having to explain himself in front of a judge. I haven't seen the gray sedan since, and Connor hasn't tried to contact me through any platform I can check. Priya and I added a second deadbolt to the door within days of the hearing, the kind that can't be picked or forced from the hallway side. I'd like to believe the restraining order means it's over, but I still glance out my window every night before I go to bed, just to make sure that street is empty. Then I still flinch a little every time someone knocks